If you're the best player in the team, you're in the wrong team. I've always strongly believed that. If you're the smartest person in a room, you're in the wrong room. Just surround yourself with people who are going to inspire you and challenge you. The first thing, she walks into the female change rooms and she sees a trough. And she's like, why is there a waterfall in here? The next thing, you walk in and there's only pictures of male football teams, all in the history of that. So I think we've got a lot of work to do at grassroots to make people and the environment more culturally inclusive. There's very few females in the game, outside of just football. From any kind of governance perspective, I got more money from Centrelink going to university than I did from playing for the Matildas full time.
Can she grab this game? Can she grab the Matildas' future?
Right, today on the Mastering Podcast, we're joined by ex-professional footballer Amy Chapman, a former Matilda and one of Australia's most respected voices in the game. She's not only mastered performing at the highest level, but also the transition from elite sport into media, leadership and personal growth. Also joining us are my co-hosts Don Sanka and Tenzing Tsewang, if I pronounce that correctly. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thanks. Close enough is good enough.
Okay, I think we'll kick things off. Let's explore the evolution of women's sport and football in particular, and how the games first changed. So how did you first get involved in soccer?
Oh yeah, gosh, feels like a lifetime ago. But I've got a twin sister and I've got an older brother, and my brother was just playing football, so it was convenient for my twin sister and I to just go out and play as well, just to kill some time. So that's how I got into football. I was probably 7. Grew up in like a country town, Albury, so on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. So yeah, I grew up playing with boys. In fact, only with boys till I was almost 16. So there's a bit to unpack in that. But that's how I discovered football. And I think being a twin as well, I was just hyper competitive. I just wanted to be better than my siblings, and that's where the passion and the fire came from.
Twin, is that an identical twin? Or
no, but if she walked in, you'd be like, that's definitely your twin. So very similar.
Did you guys sub every now and then? So if one's not feeling,
we have done some cheeky, swap IDs here and there just to change it up. But no, we're always on the field together, which is helpful.
Would have been really good to have one good player between the two of you. Like, I did play 3 seasons at the Ipswich Bulls Churches Football League.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I ended up being the goalie because it was exhausting running from. I didn't realize how far the football field is. Like it's 90 meters or something from one end to the other.
So you're that fast and they put you in goals. It's just
don't you run 400 meters?
Yeah, I do. But, but where I was getting at is if you had 2 people through the game that could sub between the twins, perfect. That would have been
We only ever passed to each other. I feel like that was the problem. We had to be taught to pass to others.
Was she a player too?
She was a very good footballer.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Did she still play?
No, when she was about 14 or 15, she did her ACL, and we didn't really know how to treat that back then. So she sort of stopped earlier than I did, but she still went all the way to play for Australian under-20s, I think. So she was very good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
so there was no female league back when you started. So you said you played with the boys up until 16. Is that correct? So there's...
Yeah, so obviously in the cities there was, but because I was in the regions in the country, there was probably not enough. There was no female-only teams at that stage, but also we loved playing with the boys. There's a bit of a story where I, tried to pretend I was a boy for a long time so that they didn't try and make me move teams.
How did you do that?
Yeah, well, so it all actually came. I think it was 99 or 2000. We went and watched the Socceroos play against Iran in a World Cup qualifier. It was an unbelievable game. I think it was when that streaker came out and pulled the net down. I don't know if any of you remember that, but Harry Kewell was there, Mark Viduka. We watched that game and we drove back. It was about 3 hours from that game, and I remember saying to my parents, I want to play for the Socceroos. I am so passionate. That's all I wanted to do was play for the Socceroos.
How old were you then?
I was probably 10 or 11. And so off the back of that, I knew that I needed to cut my hair. So I asked both my parents to get an undercut, and I quite literally had an undercut for the next 4 or 5 years because I didn't want to stand out. I thought that's what I needed to look like. And it's a bit of a powerful story about the importance of role models and diversity of role models, because I genuinely thought I needed to look like Harry Kewell to play for the Socceroos, and I didn't want the selectors to know that I was a female. So that continued for about 5 years, and I was the only girl in a lot of these teams I played in, and most of the teams I played against had no idea. So
were you already playing soccer by that age at 11?
yes, yeah.
Okay,
And I
so
was
it wasn't the genesis of you starting soccer?
No, so I was playing at like 6 or 7 years old, but and then we were either my twin and I were the only girls in the team, and then sometimes I was the only girl in the team. So I just wanted to blend in. I just wanted to be one of the boys, and continued that until puberty hit, and then it got a bit harder to hide that actually. But
That's extraordinary. So you did actually play in the boys, pretended to be a boy, and just.
Well, yeah, I mean, they all knew that my
they did
team
know,
knew.
yeah.
They knew I was a girl.
Were there any
obviously,
rules saying girls can't play, or is
up
that,
until I was 15, and then at that point there was a rule. So I was
Yeah.
the first and only female to be selected for New South Wales at that level, at under 14, under 15, to go into a camp, and then the regulators stepped in and said, actually, no, you can't. So there was a few people that, it was a bit of a battle, both my parents are lawyers, so they were like, how hard do we go with this?
yeah.
And, in the end, I was about 15 or 16 was the first time I ever played in a team full of women and other players. So it was interesting.
You talked about role models, right? Like for you said Harry Curl. Like, there's got to be other female role models that you could have looked up to and said, I want to be like that. Like,
no, I'd never heard of the Matildas, and this is not that long ago. I couldn't name one player, so I think that's just shows the importance
Wow,
of visibility.
okay. Yeah.
So no, I only knew male sporting role models, and now that's what's so brilliant about what's happened in the last few years is the number of household names we have in women, not just women's football, in women's sport in general. So I think Kathy Freeman was probably someone I looked up to because she was the only female that I knew and saw achieving and doing incredible things on TV. But for the most part, it was all men.
I think that shows the challenge a fair bit, right, for female sports. Like we take a lot of things for granted. And for you growing up, who was your role model?
Jeez. Well, I was probably a good sportsman, but I wasn't excellent at anything. So I probably was a good all-rounder, but never something that I reckon I focused on.
You're a football tragic too, aren't you?
Well, I have become more of one now because I have a son who is playing. So he's got that 13-year level. He's playing in an A-League academy now down in Sydney. So it is impressive. And it's interesting to sort of have a look at the focus of the game, particularly in different states. With my hat on for VO, what I find is that I deal with all the state associations of football. Everyone does it slightly different.
I think this is a good time for us to actually do a quick intro to Tenzing, and the reason why he's here, our regular co-hosts have taken a bit of a break. And one of the other big reasons is that, we've had a huge response to some of the sporting stories that we've been able to tell through the podcast. And a lot of people have reached to us and asked if they could become sponsors of the podcast. And, we can't be bored. I know you think there is a price, but we can't be bored, but we are open to partnerships. So for us, the biggest thing is being able to let the athletes, the sponsors and the clubs tell their stories. And that's come across really well with some of the episodes we have done. And we want to continue doing that. So the opportunity came saying, okay, well, if sports is something every one of us are passionate about, and there's a certain type of mastery in sports, why don't we create a separate sports series? And I've known Tenzing for years, and we were chatting, and he was talking about this new technology that he was bringing into Australia and working with the clubs.
Well, you're flattering me here. This is not my product.
Also Tenzing is a sports scientist as well. So we thought, okay, well, why don't we add some more masters onto the panel? And Tenzing said, I'd love to be part of it. And also I'm really interested about the technology around VR as well. So we'll touch on that a bit later on.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
But going back to role models, like where I was getting at was, for me, it was Michael Jordan, right? For me to see, and I was a track and field athlete from a really young age. We had people like Carl Lewis, Michael Johnson, all of these people that I could grow up to look like or be. And we take for granted that for female athletes, even if they wanted to become one of those athletes, there are certain sports that it's really hard to even imagine who you want to become, right? And this is a really good example of that. And sometimes we take that for granted.
Absolutely. And it's not even just the young females coming through. It's the young males to also have female role models. I think that's incredibly powerful. It's young boys just talking and analysing professional athletes. I want to be like that person or that individual, I think gender is really irrelevant. That's
true. Crazy. I didn't mention any female names. And Kathy Freeman, for me, was like, she's amazing. Like a lot of people don't know Kathy Freeman at the 2000 Olympics, but for me, she was one of the best 400 runners all throughout, like the 90s, mid-90s, right?
Exactly, and it's the dedication, it's the athleticism, it's everything that they've achieved on that scale and what it took to get there. That's what's impressive about what they've achieved. It is actually completely irrelevant around their gender, but I think it's important when people, especially young, and I've got a little 2-year-old now, so just thinking about the visibility that they have, I think it's just so powerful, because I genuinely thought I had to have an undercut to play for the Socceroos. And I genuinely thought I could play for the Socceroos. I could not. My parents were sort of like, oh, when do we tell her that that's for men? And then, so they would go out of their way to try and find me female role models, but it shouldn't have had to be that hard. And thank God now that it isn't, but we've still got a long way to go, particularly for different sports.
How's it different? Like, you've got a 13-year-old at the moment, and we talked earlier just off camera, just in relation to technology, wearables, data. How's that changed since you were growing up? Were there much data analysis as a young girl growing up playing footy?
Well, I think the higher up you go, the more you see it and the more involved, definitely. Certainly, the GPS trackers and how they use that data, even for load management and those kind of things. But I think the evolution, even over the last 5 years, has been unbelievable to watch as a fan, as someone who now commentates on the game at a professional level. The stats that we can get are unbelievable. Some of it, just throw it straight in the bin. It's boring with stats, but other times it's really incredible to really see what makes the difference between someone who's good, great, to phenomenal. And it is those little 1%ers, which is what you can measure with this tech as well. So I think it's incredible, and you can probably talk to what has changed in the last sort of 5-10 years more.
Yeah, I think wearables have taken a real I think they came to prominence for GPS. I think GPS were probably the first one. I actually used to work for the inaugural company called GP Sports back in the old day. So it was Catapult and GP Sports. They were the first wearable electronics you could wear that would measure everything.
Catapult that we know of now, which is...
Yeah, so Catapult ended up buying GP Sports. I mean, that's a side note, but they cornered the market really in terms of how you assess players. And I used to do that on a professional level at different teams in rugby league and cricket and so on and rugby union. So that's probably the genesis of, I'd say, the wearables. And then it came into heart rate monitors, and, heart rate variability was a big conversation point. And then now it's going to be video analysis, which has really taken off, I'd say, in the last 10 years. Even before that, they used to have companies like your Pro Zones that used to do high quality stuff that used to be coded up by people somewhere in a different country, and then they would send in that video. But I think the agency now is upon the athlete, particularly the young one, to give them as much ownership over how they can interpret their own data, to splice up their own clips. We're in a social media network these days. So how do you increase your profile? How do you create your own highlights? And coming back to feedback, how do you think video analysis, or what other tools would you get normally to give you that kind of tangible feedback for an athlete?
I think it also gives access to more people, right? Like, it's when we talked about having all those technologies, they were available for the people who could afford it, or to the elite teams. Now you can put something on your wrist as a grassroots athlete who's developing themselves, or a female athlete who didn't have that funding in the past. All the male-funded sports would have had all of these great technologies, but probably not the female athletes, right? And female athletes have different challenges, like iron deficiency. Like, I've seen so many amazing products that I was trying to work on, getting that real-time feedback. So there's certain type of different challenges and measurement points that is required for a female athlete that people wouldn't have cared about.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's certain things, you can have all the devices in the world, but if you can't afford to have someone to interpret it and then put that into practice, it's almost meaningless. But I think part two, what you alluded to there's some fascinating research that is being done. And I think the saddest thing is a lot of, I work in medical devices and med tech, so very much inside surgeries. I worked inside neurosurgery, watching brain surgeries for a really long time. We can unpack that shortly.
That's throwing a curveball here.
Yeah, so
I know, that's just...
tech is my thing as well, much more on the surgical side of things. But what I've learned about that is actually almost all the data and clinical trials we've had, there's very few, if any. In fact, it used to be illegal to have women as a part of clinical trials. So lot of the information that we get now
based on male.
Probably because males were making
sport?
Yeah, exactly. It's just historically they only use men for a lot of this clinical trials across the board. So there's obviously this whole new world of women's health, which now finally getting some limelight. But when we circle back, when we link that back to sport, I think some of the bigger countries in football, they're doing a lot around menstrual cycles and how we adjust loading and all that. And they use a lot of that data because I have torn my ACL 3 times, and all 3 times was a certain time of my cycle as well. So we won't go into detail about that, but there's a lot of science.
But it's quite important, right? And that's why I said the science and the data points required for a female or for a junior athlete is very different to what you would be for an elite athlete. And if all the technologies are built to focus on elite athletes, then...
Exactly. And I think also when you get that data in isolation, so you have the Catapult GPS is brilliant to figure out how many high-speed minutes players are doing, how can they sustain that international level of pace that's required for a sport like football. Yeah. But video analysis, I think, because of what a lot of people we're all football tragics here, goalkeeper 3 years. I'll take that as tragic. I think what's brilliant about football and why I'm definitely biased, but it's actually also a decision-making sport. You can't just be a really great elite athlete. So that's why, if you're quick, powerful, all those things, and maybe in other sports that's enough. So I'm not trying to put other sports there, but rugby league, if you're strong, you're powerful and you're quick, probably going to have a great career. If you can't visualize the game, make great decisions, understand your body positioning, which can only be analysed really by video analytics. It's so much more of a decision-making sport, and you need that football IQ, which we talk about a lot. If you don't have that, you will stand out like a sore thumb at the top level. It doesn't matter how quick you are.
Talking about video analysis, I'm curious about that green thing that's on the side there. We one of the things we said is we want to talk to sponsors and technology builders that are supporting sports, has the same vision, want to help grassroots sports as well. And these things, I'm really curious.
Well, getting back to it, just before we do this, quantitative, when we normally do sports science testing in a sport, it's usually quantitative. So you either get a certain speed in a 40-meter distance, it's a number. We can measure improvements on it quite simply. When we get into video and generically, I think we talk more about qualitative, and now you talk about decision making. So the most important thing I think from video in terms of the way that we either capture and analyze is the qualitative stuff. It's the stuff that you don't necessarily measure through sports science calipers or measurements or a stopwatch. So decision making, if you're a number 10, is really, really important. How do you distribute the ball? Then you can kind of analyze different positions as well. It becomes more positional specific as opposed to quantitative or measurements. If you're looking at rugby league, you're right. It's very much the big athlete that usually develops earlier are the ones that get into the pathways. But what I love about soccer is it's the little ones can survive and they can flourish. So I think video, for a great segue here, it's an AI-powered camera. So you actually don't need anyone to sit there on the sideline.
What does that mean, AI-powered camera?
Well, it will capture all of the footage in front of a 180 view. So you put it up in the middle of the field and you can erect it up to 5 to 7 meters.
Just one camera. So you don't need a whole bunch of cameras.
No, just one camera. Okay. It will capture everything in front of it from a 180-degree view.
Yeah.
Then it will code it via AI and it will follow the ball. So in the case of soccer, it's optimized perfectly for soccer because it will follow the ball, it will zoom in, it will zoom out, it will capture all of those moments around the ball. But what you can also do is zoom out and you can actually look at the goalkeeper positioning. It's on the left-hand side that's not following the ball because it's all over in the attack side. So it enables you to kind of have a a full view of the oval, but also follow the ball for those kind of
How small does the ball need to be? Can it do something like tennis, or is it just?
Yeah, I can feel you coming towards something here. Yes, you can. I'd say it's optimized for football and rugby, but it is used in all ball sports. Hockey, it's very effective.
For athletics, right? I'm in track and field.
Yeah.
There's no ball.
No, you would need
Hold
you would
on.
need
If
to
I-
run around with a soccer ball, I'd say, which will probably not
Hold
be
on.
great for your
I've got
times.
a better idea. What if I shave my head, right?
Here we
I have
go.
a bald head. Throw some,
Well, you're lucky you still have a bit of hair. That's probably
What if
positive.
I shave my head? Would it follow me?
I don't know. We would need to test that out. This is the scientific part of me. I think we need to test that out. And I'm happy to
Ooh.
do that experiment if you want to shave
Let's
your head.
let's put it to our producer, mate. Are you open to us?
Hang on. I think we need to test to see how close we get the shave to your head first. So,
And I'll shave it. I'll even draw a football on my head.
Great.
And then,
That's
but no,
essential.
it's ball sports. So,
Okay.
but it's
not bold sports.
Ball,
Bold.
yeah,
Okay,
that's
got it.
very good one. There. Yeah, no ball
Okay.
sports. So it's effective in that way, and it's our mission and vision is very much to get it to the grassroots, to make it accessible to everybody, and I think that was the
And
genesis
that's where
of the
I think
story.
we connected, right? When I was talking to Tenzing, one of the things we wanted him to come here was because he's a sports scientist more than anything else. We wanted someone legitimate, not the pretenders like we are, to sit on this panel to add some value. And then he started talking about what VO can do and how you've been working with grassroots sports. And I was like, oh, how does that work?
Well, we partner with Football Queensland, and you're on the board for Football Queensland.
Yeah, I'm coming on 6 and a bit years on the board of Football Queensland. So we've got 380 clubs, enormous captive audience in that space. And I think this is where the future of this tech is yes, we're already doing it at the elite level. How do we analyse other teams? How do we analyse our teams and improve in every isolated moment? I think that's what's brilliant is you can capture a moment and have a look at that decision making, have a look at did you look forward first or did you make that run? Did you make that run too early? All those kind of concepts. But to teach that younger generation around formation and understanding of the game, I think when we can implement that and roll that out at the grassroots level, I think that will be brilliant. But it still needs to be powered by people, as we discussed. The tech is incredible, but you need to be able to have the right people and coaches, and a lot of the grassroots football is literally on the foundations of volunteers. So I think the more we can do for volunteers in the game, the better the game will be in the future, and that's probably worth a whole podcast on its own.
I think we've glazed over the fact that didn't you play for New South Wales?
I did, yes.
So where's the defection to Queensland? And why do you have allegiance to Queensland football?
Well, because I live here, but no, I mean, I'm a blue through and through.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you are? Wow.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Well, Albury, it's borderline. To be fair, I grew up watching AFL for the most part, so I was a Collingwood tragic for 20 years. But yes, at one point when I went to the AIS with the Matildas, so I must have been 15 or 16, they said, you've got to make the move. You can't live in Albury and then also want to play internationally. So I moved to Canberra, and then the Matildas coach at that time said, there's not enough Matildas living in Canberra. They're all in Sydney or Brisbane. Where do you want to move to? Went to Sydney, almost went to Westfield Sports High, and I thought, this is a bit busy for a country girl. So picked Brisbane, and that was it. I've never looked back. So I've probably been here since I was 21, I think. So
wow.
15, 16 years now. So
And you played for the Raw then when you
played
came
10
here,
odd seasons for the Raw, played a few seasons in LA.
in the US.
Yeah, so I was at LA Galaxy at the same time Beckham was at the men's team there, so that was pretty cool. I played a couple of seasons over there. Obviously travelled a lot with the Matildas. And at one point, I think I must have been 21. I actually, I think we kind of alluded to potentially what was any regrets I had around my football career, and obviously that was heavily shaped by injuries. I had 7 knee operations, so 3 full ACL recons, which as we know is so 2 on one on the other. So I ran out of hamstrings to use at one point, so I had a patella at the other. Yeah, so I had 2 before I was 21, so 2 ACLs before I was 21. That was actually before I even had my stint with the Matildas. So, and in that process, we didn't quite have the professional environment to rehab it perfectly. I went to a World Cup, the Under-20s World Cup at 6 months post ACL, which is literally unheard of now. So yeah, wasn't the fittest, wasn't the sharpest, but I was still good enough to go, and I played some part, but that would not happen in today's age.
6 months.
6
Was it Lars?
months.
Did you do Lars?
Nope. I did a full hamstring reconstruction and I still went to a World Cup
In
at
6
months. So usually
my
they're
God.
only just running at 6 months, as you know now, and it's 12
I
month
had
protocol.
one. I've gone through it. There's no way you
Yeah,
can
I've
get
gone.
6
I've gone
months.
through it too. Do you think that had something to do with doing it again? That you didn't rehab it properly?
Definitely. I do think that played a part. Now, I did the other one, so I did left and then right, or right then left. But yes, certainly rushing that process back was a part of it, but also being a female, genetics, all these things, and playing a sport that requires sharp, agile movement. You asked how I also got into – I was a sprinter actually before. So my twin and I, we were both very quick runners, and that's probably what helped us foundationally be great footballers. But that's sort of where it actually started, is 100-metre, 200-metre dash, Albury
interesting.
record. I'm still got some records in Albury, I think, unbreakable.
I was going to ask, a lot of kids in Australia, like there's a great pathway through Little Athletics, right? Like everyone sort of gets an opportunity to go and see what they're good at,
Yeah.
and then decide where you want to go. I was actually going to ask, have you ever, been part of Little Athletics?
Yes.
And, so
in
that was-
Albury I was. Yeah, I think I loved it, and I love the competitive. I love winning, all those sorts of things. But nothing beats a team sport in
Is that
my
why?
eyes.
Okay, yeah.
So I think it's just that sense of community, and there's always that sense of competitiveness that's there. But I always, I get a lot of parents ask me now, I've got a young girl coming through, she's playing in a boys' team. Should she stay in a boys' team at this, 10 or 11 age, or should she go to girls? And I always say, play where they're happiest, play where they're going to stay and they're going to enjoy the game. But also, if they're, and this applies to young boys as well, and everyone, if you're the best player in the team, you're in the wrong team. I've always strongly believed that if you're the smartest person in a room, you're in the wrong room. Just surround yourself with people who are going to inspire you and challenge you. And I think that mantra for people who want to achieve and go above and beyond is, same for the boys. It's all good and well being I'm the top goal scorer in that team. Well, you should be playing an age group up, or you should move to a different team where you're not the best player, so that you're constantly challenged.
So what would your message be then for, let's say it's a young girl that is 11, 12, they're making a decision whether they keep playing in a boys' team where they will probably not be the physically most dominant. Do they go into a pathway that's specific for females, or do they stay in the boys' sort of outfit as long as possible?
Well, first and foremost, it's definitely around where are they enjoying their football the most, because I think we lose a lot of those players, 13, 14, they get distracted by all other things. So to keep them where they're enjoying their football. But if they're happy in the boys' team, that's where they should stay. If you are challenged every single day, and even at the top level when I was 20, even when I was playing with the Matildas, and we were outside of our A-League women's season here, I would train with the Brisbane City or Brisbane Strikers senior men's team. So we'd train with them on the weekends, throughout the week, and then we might play a game against other women or younger boys, so 17s. But ensuring that when I was training at a speed that was as high as possible, at the intensity that is as high as possible. And that is easy enough to do when you're younger, because you just go up an age group, so sometimes you might train with the boys, but you play with the girls on the weekend, and that's okay as well. There's no perfect recipe. It's around challenging yourself in every aspect of intensity, speed, aggression, all those sorts of things.
Before you move on to the next question, can I ask, what was your 100 time and the 200 time? Is that what you did? The sprints,
Oh, yeah.
100,
Oh, gosh, I was young, but I was in the 12s for, I don't know, I was for Hungy. I don't remember. I think that's what my record is in late 12s, I think. But that was just school age. Yeah. I couldn't tell you. I didn't concentrate enough on that. I don't even think I had spikes or anything. It was just,
So you're not quantitative. There's no stopwatches back there.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, no, well done. There you go. So It's a good,
What about life after the whistle? How did you find that transition into normal life, and what are some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I was 27 when I was forced to retire from the Matildas because I did my ACL. I was about 7 minutes into a game and it was bad tackle. So I knew in that moment, and that's now we know it's a 12-month injury, and the Matildas contracts were 6 months long and it was about to be renewed 2 weeks later. So in one tackle, I lost all my income. I lost everything. And I knew I wouldn't get my Matildas contract back in that moment. So I think for me, it was a bit of a forced reality of you got to sort out your future and what else are you going to do. Lucky for me, I have a very supportive family who are very put a lot of weight on education, which is not the case for a lot of the players, not the case for a lot of the Matildas. There's some who are they're extreme. They've done 4 or 5 degrees, all sorts, and then there's the others who haven't done anything. And I am often worried about that because it can all end in one moment. So I think I was always conscious of that, and we alluded before that I went into medtech. So that I was really lucky that I actually discovered that as an industry, and I think a lot of people actually have no clue what that is. But essentially, you represent the industry. You go into operating theatres and you look after all the machines and the equipment that they use. So I wanted to go into orthopedics, looking after ACLs, because I'd had 3 ACLs. I had a natural interest in that. I'd done a degree in sports science and was thinking about going back and doing physio. And then I just had a friend who worked for a big med tech company. She was heading into theatres, and she said, I was like, you're going into operating theatres. That's brilliant. I love that. And then I knew from that breakfast that's what I wanted to do. So then, yeah, I landed a role in med tech, and I landed a role in neurosurgery. So I literally went in, and I'd still play for Brisbane Roar. I'd go in and be a part of brain surgeries and look after the machines that remove brain tumours. That was my job.
So you just sit there in the background and just sort of watch?
Yeah,
and
my
help?
job is to ensure the safe and effective use of that pretty hardcore machinery in there. So I work with the neurosurgeon, I work with the spine surgeons, and then I'd literally go to Brisbane Roar training in the afternoon. And I remember just the girls would be like, what have you been up to today? I was like, I can't even tell you the thing.
I want to take a couple of steps back before we go to the switch to the whistle. I'm really interested now, because studying as a professional player is a tough thing to do. But then what was your pathway? Like we got to where you were like a 20-year-old and you had to make the switch from, playing with the female, or wanting to be a male player, to then realizing, you can't play for the Socceroos, and then you had to sort of make that transition to the Matildas. What was that pathway like? How did you become a Matilda, and was that easy?
No, well, it wasn't easy. I think when I moved to Canberra at 15 or 16, that was the first time I played in a competitive female environment. So it was so eye-opening as well, just to know that other female players were also playing. Like, I think because I grew up in the country town, it was just so different. And then I realised, I'm actually pretty good. Like, I knew I was quite good, but I didn't realise comparison to females and all those sorts of things that I was like, I could genuinely go quite far here. So I think that was when I first moved to Canberra, and I must have been 15 or 16, and I played in the Open Women's A-Leagues season, and then it was about 4 or 5 different Matildas in that squad at that time, and I was like, okay, I can make a career of this. So I was lucky enough, I think I was 16, 17, maybe the first time I went to the Matildas camp, Australian under-20s, then I did my ACL twice, so it was sort of delayed slightly.
So you didn't have an opportunity to stay home and play. You have to move to 100%
Canberra. Had to move.
Like
yeah.
And that, okay.
Yeah.
Because
I think I was in year 11 when I moved, and I had to restart year 11 when I moved to Canberra because they do different schooling systems. So that was a juggle, and it was a big call for my parents too, because they valued education very, very highly. So I think there was a bit of a debate between mum and dad of like, she's not going to make any money out of football, but do we let her chase her dreams? So they let me go. So, then I spent the next 5 or 6 years bouncing around Canberra doing that, and then, I was lucky enough to, compete at the highest level, getting the Matildas.
That opportunity, not having that locally, is that again, I didn't do my education in Australia, so is that something that's something that is challenging for female athletes, or it's all athletes? Like,
Oh, that's all athletes across the board. I think because Australia's so huge, but luckily the grassroots programs, the development programs are getting better and better, and there's more opportunities to stay where you are. But ultimately there comes a time where around that 14, 15, you have to make a call. Are we really going to commit to this as a genuine career? And often with the boys, they often consider heading straight to the UK. Are we going to do trials? And there's a fine balance of all of those things, and that's a big question mark often for parents of kids.
Yeah.
I was going to say you're going through that right now, right?
Well, I think it's probably the biggest conversation piece, particularly when you've got a child, or you are looking after a child, or you're a coach of a child that's of high achievement in football. You've got to make a decision on where you think the best philosophy of learning is going to occur. Now, becoming a professional athlete, particularly in football, is minute. So I think it's like 0.001% chance of becoming a professional athlete in football.
Is that Australian or international?
That's in any team. I think I had the stats somewhere around any professional team in any country. Now, to make it into Europe to be a professional athlete is, again, 100 times less than that. So you're looking at the minuteness of minuteness. Now, the question we've got is, where is the best development pathway? So for you, it was Canberra and AIS. Where is Canberra? Does Canberra play a big role now in female athletes?
No, so the AIS is shut down for both
Correct.
male and female football. So there's state-based institutions, but also the NPL clubs. Sometimes they are better. There's private academies. There's loads of different avenues, and that holistic decision making for the child or for that individual. Even what clubs you do at the top level. We look at some of these key players like Hayley Rasso. She's now at Tottenham Hotspurs. She moved from Real Madrid, so she came from the US, absolutely dominating. Went to Real Madrid, wrong call for her. Went to Spurs, wrong call for her. She's now looking for. She's one of the top players in the world. But if you don't pick the right club to set yourself up for success, at any level of that, it's a decision making. You're not guaranteed success at any point. So
to be fair, she's hopping around different teams that are all world class.
I mean, that's
Do you know what I mean?
top
Whereas
level.
I think the journey of like a boy at that age to get into any one of those teams would be highly exceptional and a
Unheard
rarity.
of. Yes, yeah, exactly.
So, okay. Yeah, it's interesting.
So how did you then go from that to, where you ended up playing for the Matildas? I'm really interested to see, how did you make that sort of, even without having all the pressures of becoming a professional athlete, deciding what you want to do in a professional career, to think about that is tough enough. So how did you say, I'm going to do a sports science degree?
Yeah, I think for me, having a bit of balance was always important, because you can get
Where did that come from? Is that from your parents, from the coaches?
Absolutely. I'll be from my family, without doubt. I think everyone in my family have done degrees, a big law background. My dad would have loved us to take over the farm. I think the agriculture side just didn't come naturally to me. So, and I've always had I think as athletes, we all have a natural fascination on the human body. How can it perform? And then I think that kind of came across into health and all those sorts of things. So I knew I always wanted to study something in the human body. I didn't know what, but I actually found studying was so good to keep me balanced as a footballer, because otherwise if you focus too much, you can absolutely overthink. And I've seen some of the best talented people overthink everything, and then they're overanalyzing and they actually don't perform as well. So if you got to get that balance right, and that's where I think people focus too much at times on certain things, that you watch what you're eating too much to the fact that it's a detriment in your performance. So I think that balance was essential. And I think the era that I came through as well, my contract for the Matildas was, I got more money from Centrelink going to university than I did from playing for the Matildas full time.
That's crazy.
You're forced to have balance. Nowadays, it has changed. It's not as much as everybody thinks, but it's certainly you have the ability to commit fully and wholeheartedly. So I actually didn't have that option. So that's why I always needed something else.
I do like that word balance, right? For and also education is power, I believe. It's one of those things where I've got a theoretical physics degree. You're right. Sports people are very curious about the science side of how we do what we do. And, I don't know if there's enough guidance from the coaches and the clubs and everything else, because education is perceived as a distraction when you're playing.
I don't know about that. I find that a lot of the professional footy teams now have a huge emphasis, and I know Wayne Bennett, for example, he's a huge advocate of having
but is that an
education.
exception? I agree with you. Yeah, is that an exception to the rule? Or?
No, I'd say it's a lot more standardised now. You got welfare managers in those clubs that look after specifically education of athletes, particularly the young ones, and they have a certain amount of budget that is betrothed to education for those athletes. So I'd say that it's changed over time, absolutely, but it's journey after football or sport, professional sport, is a big conversation.
But there's a big difference between doing a well-being seminar versus building a career pathway where you have an opportunity to do a bachelor's in science or a degree, right? And you're on the administration side now in Queensland football. What are those pathways? Are there?
And maybe what's your role there as well? Like, what are you responsible for from a Football Queensland Board of Directors?
Yeah, and great question. I think just to answer I think it's actually been traditionally a bit different between men's sport and women's sport. Is women always had to have balance because you never earned enough. And I think maybe some of the sports that don't have as quite as much income as well, you've always been forced to have that balance. Whereas, if you're a top 1% footballer and you can make, a couple of $100 million contracts, they dedicated fully and you needed to compete at that level. Whereas I think in the last 5 years, particularly in NRL, AFL, they're focusing a lot more on how can we make these people more well-rounded, which will hopefully then, make them better players and better people as well, because I think it's more than just your on-field performance. So that sort of captures that. But women's elite sport have always been forced to have balance because we never earn enough money to begin with. So
what about media? Because I know that when we interviewed Riley and Cedric recently, that the social media element is a huge way from an income and supplementing income perspective. How was that for you?
Well, it was a bit non-existent in my time. I think mid-Matildas, I remember setting up a Facebook at some point. I was a bit before that whole era of influencers, and I think I look at all my teammates who are literally the current Matildas that I played with and grew up my whole career playing with them day in, day out. They went overnight from having, 5,000 followers to Sanka's got close to 2 million, all those kind of things. So I think the last 5 years has been a huge, and I think we need to do a better job of educating them on how they can use that, as an asset, or some of them don't want to as well. Let them be themselves and away from the limelight and just do their job really well. So I think there's a fine balance because some people feel pressured to do that where they don't want to. And so I was a bit before that.
It's having a huge influence on those younger athletes now, isn't it?
It is, massively. And I suppose I've been on a little bit during the World Cup on the sports media side of things.
Yes.
I was really lucky. Well, I suppose lucky, but I fell into sports media. I fell into commentating. Someone just said, "Oh, do you want to come in and give it a go?" It's actually a lot trickier than it looks, and turns out I was all right at it. So that's good. Obviously, I know and love the game and have a really great understanding of the game. But to be able to articulate that in real time and keep it interesting and all those kind of things has been an art. But I was lucky enough to be heavily involved with the Women's World Cup. So I got to commentate the actual Women's World Cup final to the world.
Oh,
so
wow.
Not just Australia. Anyone listening in English. So it was
good.
1.2 billion people
Wow.
listened to that game.
Wow.
So
How was that?
That's
What
got to
was
go
that?
on the top of
Yeah,
your resume.
that's-
Surely
it's up
that's
there.
up there.
It's up there. I think it's having a baby, and then that's right up there. I think in terms of cool things I've done in my life, that's right up there. But even just to see the impact that the Women's World Cup had in women's sport, on football, in this country was phenomenal. And to be, I was lucky enough to be the forefront. I was in the Matildas camp with them. I interviewed all the players. I was right in there. It's about as good as it could be if you weren't playing in there.
How exciting was that? Like being in Australia, doing that, and also, did you call on that match with Australia and?
The France game, I
Yeah.
did. I commentated that game too. So the penalty shootout,
And
which
that
is
was-
hilarious. I think I said I feel sick about 3 or 4 times. So I just couldn't contain because Mackenzie Arnold is one of my really closest friends. I've grown up with these girls as well. To see them in those moments, and Courtney Vine, she's a player I grew up playing with as well. So to just see them, and I was feeling it like the rest of the country were, and
We didn't
it stopped
care.
an emotion.
That was the pivotal moment. I think gender just disappeared in sports
Absolutely.
for us.
Well, I took my son. I think we went to about 3 games. We went to the first 2 that were in Stadium Australia. My son bought the jersey as well. So we were right into it. It was the most exciting thing I've done in the football world, probably in Australia.
It
Yeah.
put women's football just on the map, didn't it? Everybody was talking about it.
I think it was just football then, wasn't it? It was just like a love of
And that's why I said the
football.
gender was gone. It was just football. It was entertaining football.
And people ask about what was your favourite thing around the World Cup. Obviously, there's loads of highlights, but it was in those little moments, how I'd just be walking along the street, days after a game and everyone's still talking about it. I had some random people buying me coffees who were just like, I was like, I'll take that, thank you. And then also just, again, there was no mention of gender. They were analysing the game, critiquing players. It was and they knew every player from every other team. My little nephews, they have all the jerseys and every player. They have their favourite players. That is what was so refreshing. And it went from I've spent my whole career where people would say, how many games did you play for the Socceroos? And I'd be like, oh, do I bother correcting them or just let it go? A whole career of just letting things slide. And then now there's no way people would make that mistake. And being a Matilda and what it took has gone up so much higher on the respect level as well. So it's brilliant.
Yeah, the conversation also changed from saying, okay, are they deserving of the money that they're asking for? Are they? Should there be a gender equality in pay? We're saying, okay, well, the pay should be based on the eyeballs, right? And that World Cup changed that. Like we saw.
Yeah, I mean,
what you could do.
It's a complex narrative, that one, because the system has been set up to literally squash. I think there's a big story about back 80 years ago in the UK, women's football was far more popular than men's football, and then they actually squashed it. So this is in the 1920s. They were selling out stadiums everywhere, women's football, and they, for two reasons, as they said, we're going to can the entire league because it's taking away from men's football and it's making women come across less feminine. So they crushed the whole thing. So it's taken us 80 years to get us back to doing that. So women's football, or even women's sport, has always been incredibly marketable, and it's 50% of the country are females. So it's actually been the system that has squashed it for so long. So anyways, it is
a false narrative. I agree with you. And it's, you're looking at stats for the sake of looking at stats, and stats are based on whoever is analyzing the stats and presenting it the way it's presented. And you were able to break that stereotypical sort of view at that World Cup.
And I was playing with the Matildas, only a few years prior to that, and we'd be playing a game in Brisbane. We'd be lucky to get 2,000 or 3,000 players here. The same players were playing. Sam Kerr was out there playing in your local backyard and no one knew. So the only difference, and we were playing at the same speed, pace, and I think that's what everyone was really impressed by, is like these girls are so aggressive, they're so talented, they're so powerful, so skillful. This is entertaining. The only thing that changed was the platform that they were given. That's the difference. So I think it was brilliant. We needed an event like that to change things and speed it up for what maybe would have taken 5-10 years to get it.
Impact has that had on female soccer?
Enormous. I mean, if
female
I put
sports,
you mean the success of Matildas?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think if I put my Football Queensland hat on, we've had 180% growth in female participation.
There you go. Yep.
Phenomenal. And I think if we talk about the impacts that sport can have on community, society, and health, that's what's powerful. It's all great. You've got these elite, figures to follow, but the grassroots is really what matters, and that's what's going to change and set this next generation up. So you don't have to drive, 100 metres down the road and you'll see the impact that it's had by the number of young girls playing out there and loving it.
What about young boys? Has that increased as well?
100%. All of our numbers.
So it's just a game of soccer overarchingly has increased.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's
I think it's up 18% participation across Australia.
I've got two girls, right? Like running out like a girl narrative has to go, and it's disappearing slowly. I think because of what the Matildas have done. No, it's a lot of pressure for the Matildas, and we can see that, right? Because they're now expected to perform every time they turn up. No team can perform.
It's tricky, and we have been overachieving for a very long time. The Matildas. If you look at the number of people who play in Australia compared to the US, China, even North Korea, it's fun. Like they are incredibly strong footballing nations. So we have a golden generation now. So I'm glad it's happened when it's happened. But I think when I look at the stereotypes of role models that women have had traditionally, I think that's the most powerful thing is you can now have strong, athletic, aggressive, and that's still an incredible female role model, where traditionally it was you had models and you needed to be this, you need to be 6 foot, you need to be skinny, you could, those, but now even CrossFit have done incredible things to idolize strong women, and that is what I'm so excited about for my 2-year-old daughter is fitness is way more important than being beautiful or all these sorts of things, strength. And I love that. And I think it changes the narratives of how men view women as well. So it's probably worthy of another podcast as well.
Fitness side of things. What about mental fitness? How did that, is that something that's quite structured back when you were playing?
Absolutely not. I think we had no structure whatsoever. It was
So no sports psychologist as part of the team.
no. There is now.
No, now, but back in your day.
No, no. There wasn't in my day.
Okay, for female, male sports would have always had, right? Like that's.
Yep.
We had nothing. I mean, maybe in the very last few years of when I was playing elite football, would we have anything to do with? And
Forget about sports psychologists. They don't even have a coach right now. So we'll get to that later on. But
yeah, it was funny how much, and I wish that was something I did better in my time, was take a bit of control and ownership over my own view of, because especially being a striker, your performance anxiety of I must score, I must be involved, and the overanalyzing, it can actually really bring your performances down. So I think if I had my time again, I would have invested much more in my ability to remain confident at that elite level, because physically you can do all those things, but then you're comparing yourself constantly, and it's a tricky balance at that elite level to stay at the top. And I think that youthful confidence, so see some of these youthful players come in and they just, they do not care. Whereas the older you get, the harder it is to bring that youthful confidence.
Yeah. In particular, the injury, because that's something that a lot of players struggle with. Like you mentioned, you've done your ACL 3 times. I've done mine as well. And just the impact that has in the back of your mind that, well, last time I did this move, this happened. How did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think it's tricky because I also had to recreate myself slightly as a player, because after you've done your ACL 3 times, I probably lost 5% of my speed, so my speed and power. So I almost had to focus on other parts of my game, because where I was still a quick player, but I was a very quick player before that, so I could get away with things that then. So you had to recreate.
It's a de-acceleration as well, isn't it?
That's right, and the change of direction. I mean, I was never great in the air because I'm 5'0", but there's certain things that you have to change and adjust. And I think as you get older, you see players. They almost in football they become more central because they lose that speed, but they have that game awareness, that vision, and you'd know this. So yeah, I became a new player, and I think when
change position.
Well, back when I was playing for the Matildas when it first came, that we did 4-4-2, and I was a right winger, so I was super quick. Right, yeah, that was brilliant.
Did you play football as well?
Absolutely. I captained my team back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Back in primary school, I played, and my son, he was an average soccer player, but he went on to be a pretty good referee. Retired last year, but He was refereeing NPL. Ran a few lines with the Raw, and to your point as well, you mentioned with the training. So all of his training was all done with the Raw referees. So you're putting yourself in that. In that elite space, being able to train with the guys which are in the position where you're aiming for.
Yeah, you've got to be tough. You have good resilience to be a referee, especially at top level, even NPL level. It's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
But
that positional play, I remember having conversations with him of just the importance of that, to be in the right position to try and make the right call.
Yeah, and even under fatigue to make the right decisions, all those kind of things. And you've got a lot of heated people out there giving you a bit of feedback that you're not chasing. But
well, every position has a particular kind of physiology attached to it. So your front three, your wingers, and your strikers. Like you played 9, right? Or did you play solo 9?
My main position was a 10, but I did play as like a false 9
right.
at times.
So they have a sort of, that's a position on the field, but it's usually to do with a certain run. So you might make longer runs. If you're a winger, you might have certain channels that you work in, whereas a 10 might be very much specifically through the middle, and you might have multi-directional movements, or you might be playing the ball back and forward, and you've got to defend in there. And then you've got your defenders that will play a particular role as well.
That doesn't vary for different team game plans on how you're going to play. You're saying that it's quite specific nowadays, that as a number 9 or a number 10, you're going to play a specific way?
It depends on the way that so you look at it 2 ways. You can look at it via video, qualitative, and then you can look at it physiologically, what you're running and what sort of speeds you get to and what your distances are that you cover. So yes, you're right. It would probably depend on what position and what structure you play. Like your wing backs now have to run.
Yeah.
Like your Ellie Carpenter.
Yes.
Is a runner.
Yes. And I mean, there's, like you said, there's physiological things that make you best for each position. It's similar, I guess, in other sports where you've got, you've got to be big, strong, and your ruck rovers and all those kind of things. They're small on-ball players, but it's it's very complex when it comes to football, but where I ended up playing was a number 10, and my job was I'm a very attacking, skillful. You're the X factor. You bring in all that X factor when it comes to going to attack. I started my career out wide, so I wasn't expected to create, but I was expected to be very quick, very fit,
direct,
and whip in great crosses. That was my job, and you've got very specific jobs within the team. And like you're holding your number 6, for example, in a football team would be your playmaker, your anchor, someone who's defensively very good, but on the ball has the best 360 vision. So it doesn't actually matter, whether you're small, tall, any of those things. It's your understanding of the game and your ability to execute on that position.
Also, the technology giving you a better understanding as well. Like I think the biggest quantum shift was what the Golden State Warriors did with, Steph Curry and in basketball. They went down the path of statistics and beat the big boys, right? And now it's the same thing with all sports. We're starting to look at more and more numbers. We were talking about earlier about tennis where they changed, like they started looking at the shots and measuring all the data around it, and how Novak has taken advantage of that. And so all the sports are changing with the technological advancements that we are having. How much do you think that's going to sort of it's giving way for people who don't have that big presence or the fastest sort of speed on the field to make sort of better inroads into the sports? And how is that going to help female sports? I think it's going to be pretty big.
I think it's a fascinating time for women's football in particular because we see some of these big major nations deciding, oh my God, Spain have decided to play now. They just come out and win the World Cup, but their team is so phenomenal. So how does Australia keep up with these other countries where European, they're so technically strong in Asian countries, which is who we need to play against to qualify for Olympics, they are so technically on the ball phenomenal. Whereas the US are a powerful team. They are just athletes. They are sprinters who can kick. Essentially, that's generalising.
You played in the US, right? How was
I
that?
played in the US. I played against the US national team, and even the German. They look like they've been fed well. Like they were all 6'5", and it was like, how do we beat? So I think that's one of the big things is how do you, as a nation, with the skills that you've got, beat a team that's incredibly technical like Japan or North Korea, then come up against a Germany or the US who are all like 6'7", incredibly strong, but also they're not quite as agile. So that you've got to, I think that's where data comes in, where you can go, this is why we are better.
Well, it's also investment. So think about the US women's team, right? They've been playing in colleges for a very long time. Yep. There's Title IX there as well, so equal money needs to be spent at university level on males and females. So when you've got a comparison program like American football and one of your big South universities of Mississippi or something, where they're huge, they need to be equal money spent on female, and it's usually football. So US has probably got an advantage in that way because it's got the bigger leagues, it's got the university spend. What more do you think Australia needs to do to get it to that level to compete against your Spains and your European country powerhouses?
Oh, it's a great question. Well, I think first and foremost, it's a numbers game as well. And I think we've seen the rise of women's AFL, which is brilliant. I love that for women and having the options as a young girl coming through because I would have loved to have played AFL. So I love that. But also football is Australia's number one played sport. And I think people get a bit confused with that because they're like, maybe it's not the most watched.
I thought it was netball, so it's football's big.
We are
highest participation is football, soccer.
By a long shot, by a country mile.
Up to what age? Because I noticed that as a youngster, I played obviously, and I finished up at about 14, 15 to go and do other things. But in those junior years, it was supremely popular. But at what stage? So as an adult participation sport, is it still number one?
Still number one. In a team sport, I mean, there's swimming and cycling, which is a bit harder to measure because they're not be organised.
They're probably more recreational in nature.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they would typically drop off a cliff anyway across all sports around that adolescent 15 to 17-year-old mark.
Yep.
But do they come back?
Yes.
So tennis went through an emergence with Tennis Australia. We went and had an interview with those guys at one point. They lose all their kids from about 14 onwards. And then what happens is they said, well, let's focus on our community level later on.
Yep.
And that's when they come back. And it becomes a lifetime sport, right?
Yeah, and it depends if you're talking holistically as participation or if we're talking the elite pathways. And I think sometimes, and what we've seen happen recently, is it's easier to make it it's easier to make it in other sports than it is football. So they may grow up playing football, but domestically you could jump into an AFL team and you could have a really great career domestically. But now there's more and more options also to go overseas and earn a lot of great livings and live, all these amazing adventures you can have with football as well. I think.
Back on the participation. So when you've got the US and you obviously they've got a great pathway, and it's awesome to hear that they're spending that equal money on male and female. But clearly the UK, isn't that one of the countries that are at the top level as far as participation goes, and obviously elite athletes coming out of that in soccer?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a little bit of a misconception around because everyone globally has heard of the Premier League. They know these big, massive clubs. In the women's game, there's 3 or 4 that do a phenomenal job. You've got the Man Cities, you've got the Arsenals, you've got the Chelsea. Phenomenal. Then there's sort of daylight in the rest of that competition. So I think when you look at the US, they've got, say, 15 teams. I don't know the exact stats, but they are all incredibly competitive, all of them treated well, all of them exceptionally professional, whereas the top 2 or 3 in Europe are excellent. So Barcelona flog everyone. They're winning every week 7 or 8-0 because difference between the top of the league and the bottom of the league. So it's about you need to have both really. You need to have a top increase the ceiling. So get those Man Cities out there and go, I'm going to pay millions and millions of dollars for these girls. We're going to train them so we're unbeatable. But you need a bottom-up approach as well. If that's not happening, then the league just...
So you think that is lacking over in Europe?
I know it's lacking over. The same in France. There's 2 or 3 teams. They win absolutely everything. So Europe has a long way to go in bringing the bottom up at that professionalism, whereas Japan, again, stronger all across the board, US stronger across the board. But the top may not beat the Man City because they can just buy everyone. But it's getting there. It's slowly but surely. You see other teams like Spurs go, okay, I'm going to invest in my women. Everton, okay, we're going to get there. That'll take 4 or 5 years, but it's coming, which is brilliant.
Amy, so just going back to your post soccer career, football career, what are you doing now? Like are you still working on the medical device business? Is that what you're doing at the moment, or
great question? So I spent 10 years with a major medtech company doing neurosurgery, and then about 7 or 8 months ago, I left that company. Just wanted a new challenge, and I've got my own company in medtech. So we do a few things. As one help.
Give it a plug. What's the name of the company?
Medical Technology Institute is what it's called, and so we do 3 main things really. Is we help people get into medtech. So you said, how do you get into medtech? No, there's no degree that you can do that will get you into medtech. You've got to have a science degree. You have to have some sort of degree, and then everything is trained by the company. So how do we grow that talent pool? And my in particular passion is helping athletes get into medtech because it's a very rewarding career. And it actually suits them a lot. I think a lot of athletes, they kind of fall into something because someone's there and gives them an opportunity, which is fantastic. But I'm also quite passionate about ensuring they have a passion that they can follow because, I loved it, and I've probably helped maybe 50 people get into medtech, most of them being athletes, because they have, and all of them are still in it. All of them are thriving. So we do that. We have an education business. So we got a 6-week course to help upskill people to help them get into medtech. We've partnered with all the 4 major sporting codes, so who have funding to support their athletes. Then part 2 is we recruit. So we get those talent and we give them, partner them with the major medtech companies. And then my real passion, if I'm being truly honest, is around bringing incredible medical technologies to Australia. So similar to VO coming in and changing the game here, I want to do that, but on a particular passion around neurosurgery. So some of these technologies that are being developed to treat brain tumours overseas, they're not coming to Australia anytime soon.
What are those leading countries in that space?
Oh, Europe, without doubt, and the US. Very tricky, and it's a very tricky process to navigate, but we've having a few conversations now about bringing some technologies to Australia who wouldn't come here because we're too small. So everything's a commercial. It needs to, not only is it going to save patients' lives or give them opportunities and hope where they don't have it, but if it commercially doesn't stack up, which it doesn't, we're too small in Australia. So what we do is we go to the companies over there, and we bring the market to them and say, let us do it on your behalf. And then we distribute those products in Australia.
If an athlete wants to, be a part of this or join you, what's the best avenue? How do they?
Well, yeah. So obviously, if they have any interest in health or have done any degree in health, the best pathway is obviously to reach out to us, and then we help either if they're ready to go, and then we'll help them try and find a job and upskill them. If they want to do more study or they're still playing, like there's a handful of current Matildas doing our online course, which is brilliant. So it's very technical, it's very niche. So you're not just learning it, why do people have knee replacements? You're learning what do they actually do inside theatres? Why are they using robots inside theatres to make cuts and do all of those? It's very it's almost like building, but inside the operating theatre, if that makes sense. So it's a bit combo of construction. It's very hands-on. It's very niche, but we help put them on that pathway, empower them, and then we help land them the job. So that's
how much is that? So you mentioned the word building. That's my background, so my ears are pricked up. How big are robots going to get? How do you see the future of that in the operating theatre moving forward?
Oh, it's massive. And I think there's maybe, again, a misconception around what the robots are actually doing. So if you look at knee replacements, for example, what you do there is traditionally the surgeon makes the cuts on where they need to, but now you upload a patient's CT scan into the robot, then it's preloaded, so it makes those cuts exactly based on that patient and where it needs to be cut. So I think it's not a robot like how people picture robots, but the technology and AI, unbelievable opportunities in health. It's just can the health system
I think we need to have a
it.
separate podcast.
Yeah.
That sounds cool, doesn't
It's
it?
a bit to unpack there.
Well, I do have someone who's going to join our panel that's a specialist in neuroscience research. So I think this is a good one for us to actually unpack with him sitting down on the chair. We're going to run out of time, right? So, but there's a few things that I wanted to ask you on the ticket and I haven't asked, but we, as a panel, I think we should quickly go through those things because I don't want to miss out on it.
Sure.
One is Usain Bolt playing football. What was that about and what's your opinion?
I think Usain Bolt really backed himself as a footballer. Unfortunately for him, very quick.
He's a better sprinter than a footballer.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, it was great. It was a great PR exercise for the Central Coast Mariners and for the A-Leagues, but he stood out like a sore thumb, unfortunately. But I think
so you wouldn't put him in the middle. You'd put him on the wing. So this is the relevance of the positions.
Yeah, he looked very out of place, but brilliant. He loves the game. He genuinely believes he's good, and thought he was too good for the A-Leagues, unfortunately. But I didn't mind it. It was entertaining.
So in dropping names, you played with Ronaldinho last.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
you were there. I watched it.
yeah.
Yeah, that was funny.
How was that?
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That's the first time I pulled on the boots in 3 years. Was because Ronaldinho said he was coming to town. I played in
Cahill. You had some.
I played in Tim Cahill's Celebrity 11 against Ronaldinho, which was pretty unreal. He didn't nutmeg me, which was like a key thing that I was going for. No, it was a brilliant experience. I hadn't put on the boots since having a baby and all sorts of things, but I should have scored. I'm still disappointed in myself. First touch, should have scored, but great experience. It was good fun.
What do you do for fitness now?
Oh, well, I've got a 2-year-old, so if I had all the options in the world, I would love to cycle. So I'm pretty into my road cycling and I loved that. I just go to the gym at the moment and I run. I couldn't do a marathon or anything like that because my knees don't love back-to-back running. So I can run one day, got to have the next day off, run the next day. So but gym and cycling, I think, but I would love to do something competitive again. I'd probably get into triathlon.
Well, it's so important as an ex-professional athlete, and then once you've had that transition and then being able to maintain that, because you were doing a lot as a professional athlete, and then, I think it's important for the average day warrior to maintain a level of fitness.
I'm looking for something new if you're going to sign me up for something. I mean,
Well, there is since you're a 100 and 200 meter runner, maybe it's time for you to come and have another crack again.
Oh, God, the hamstrings will be at the start line still.
5-a-side team, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I could do.
400 metres.
I'm still very competitive and probably don't have the body to take me there. But.
Cycling's, I think, a great one because you can do that up until a very old age, and, bad knees aren't too much of a problem.
Yeah. I honestly, I haven't found something that I've gone, this is my next thing. And I think it's been a journey of trying to
And
find out
this
what
has
it is.
been one of my things, right? I'm a huge advocate of masters sports, whether it's athletics, swimming, cycling, or whatever it is. Especially for someone like you who's been competitive, just going out there and having a run is not going to tick that box, right? For me, it didn't. And that's why like the competitiveness is what keeps bringing me back. I'll keep running. People ask me, why do you keep running around circles in jumping over hurdles at my age? It's because I need it. And that's what sort of gets me out of bed, and that's what keeps me fit. And I think we'll be better off as a society if we can get more people to actually find what
Absolutely.
gets them out of bed.
And I think that is one of the big things when you leave elite football environment. It's very hard to find a goal that you're so passionate about. Like since having a baby, I was thought, I'll get back out to 5K and I'll just try and do my best 5K. But it wavers weekly. I'm like, oh, do I feel like it? No, that motivation is not quite as, I'm like, who's really measuring me here?
Did you want me to ring you up and yell at you?
Yeah,
Tell you to keep doing it?
You have to
Exactly.
you have to train for something, and that's what you've done all your life, right? So,
Correct. And it never wavered. Like there was never a hesitation to jump out of bed and going, I'm doing those extras, I'm doing this, I'm going like, but as life changes and you get kids and all those kind of things, I have struggled, I think, to really find that's something that I'm like, I really want to do this. But I'm open to ideas. But yeah, without fail, I do.
Find you something.
I exercise every day because I don't feel good if I don't. But
Queensland Masters Athletics, we run every weekend. You can, you're more than welcome to come and join us.
Okay, there'll need to be a ball or something in front of me. I need to chase something. Maybe you.
You need to play some five-a-side soccer or something.
Also, yeah, could do that.
You need a team though. That's the thing, and it's got to be competitive, and you got to win.
Okay.
That's the opportunity to win.
I don't do any defending. I stopped doing that years ago.
So okay, going back to my important question. This one's a controversial one, right? Like transgender athletes. It's a tough one. What do you think?
Yeah, it is a very interesting topic, and I think if I maybe have a different answer if I've got my Football Queensland hat on, or if I have just my personal view. So, as a footballer, this has never been a concern for us, and I have had some transgender athletes come and train with us, play with us, but I grew up playing with men, and we loved that. And I also think it's different when it's, like I said before, we're a decision-making sport. So if you're just a strong athletic person that comes in, that's not going to make you a better footballer, and it's not going to make you make better decisions on that day. So we haven't seen it be quite an issue as you would in weightlifting or swimming or a direct speed,
it makes a
pace.
huge difference.
So we're a decision-making sport as well, and if you don't have the skills, you don't have the skills. So I think it's less prevalent in women's football. Mind you, we did play against South Korea in a tournament when I was playing for the Matildas, and turns out they did have two men playing up front. So they ended up getting kicked out of this tournament. And there's a number of – this is also a fine line as well, I think, because there's a couple of phenomenal Nigerian female footballers whose testosterone levels are very high, but they naturally are women. So they just happen to be also, I think, elite female athletes will obviously be on somewhere on the spectrum of power and all those sorts of things as well. So it's a really tricky one for me with my Football Queensland hat on, because we have had some issues in New South Wales football where people, I think first and foremost is safety of everyone involved. Yeah. I absolutely believe in opportunity for everyone. But paramount is always around that safety when it comes to grassroots. I think elite is a different conversation, but it's not so much of an issue. If there's someone, a prominent person in women's football that talks about this very passionately. Yeah. If you ask every Matilda what their top 20 issues are with women's football, I can tell you there's 100 issues much stronger than that for women's football.
I think that's a really good point. Right?
Well, there's a million things. If you've got the platform, talk about things that really are going to make an impact.
What's the number one thing they're concerned about?
Oh, well, I think culturally, I think there's still a very male-dominated sports. It's very difficult for young females to walk in and feel culturally accepted in a lot of sports. We see this a lot in rugby league, and people say, what do you mean by that? So I took my 2-year-old to a football game at a local club recently. The first thing, she walks into the female change rooms and she sees a trough. And she's like, why is there a waterfall in here? And I was like, oh, okay. And then the next thing, you walk in and there's only pictures of male football teams, all in the history of that. So I think we've got a lot of work to do at grassroots to make people and the environment more culturally inclusive. Even if I put my board and governance hat on, there's very few females in the game outside of just football. From any kind of governance perspective, there's very few female coaches. I think it's huge. There's a massive can of worms of things we could be doing and investing in. That's where I would see the priorities.
Does the Legacy Fund, do you know much about it, and how has that impacted football landscape for females in Australia? I
know a little bit about it. Obviously, it's ongoing. So I think what the World Cup did obviously is phenomenal. And I think it's not just for women's football, it's for the sport of football in Australia, and we've been severely underfunded for a really long time because, we aren't the AFL, we aren't rugby league, so I think we're a top up sport as opposed to bottom up as opposed to top down, and that's our funding model. And it's difficult to get the support of government. So I think the Legacy Fund and the power of the Women's World Cup has been essential in changing the infrastructure, getting women's change rooms at these clubs where there were none. There's a lot of work to be done in that space.
Talking about Legacy and World Cup, the next one's going to be in the US, Canada, Mexico, I think. What's happening? Like how are we tracking? I touched on it before. We don't have a coach yet. We've got an interim coach. Our coach abandoned us. What is?
Oh, I don't know if he abandoned us. His time was up, I think. But
it feels like that, right? Like when you're looking from the outside in. I'm not. Yeah.
And the interim coach was the perfect person for it. He was Tom Samani was my coach at Matildas for a time as well. He knows the game. He knows the players. He knows everything. He's done a fantastic job. As far as I'm aware, it's a done deal with who is going to sign, it's just waiting for that contract window to come.
Do we have an exclusive here? Or?
I would, if I was a betting person. I think they've publicly said it's come down to John Aloisi or Joe Montemuro, and it would almost certainly be the latter, I would think.
Okay.
He's fantastic. He's won he hasn't won Champions League, but he's won the major championships with Lyon, Juventus, Arsenal, Melbourne City. He's passionate about the women's game. He's passionate about football. He's the perfect person for it. He's just been contracted up until a certain point in time. So that's why.
Is he a cultural fit for the Matildas?
Yeah. So a lot of the players, he knows them and he brought them up under Melbourne City, and time will tell, I think. He's certainly got the football brain, the football smarts, but his job will be to get the best out of these individual players and deliver when it comes to tournaments. We've got the Asian Cup on home soil coming up.
Yeah. That's going to be the next big one, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know, but we haven't. People sort of say, did you go to the Olympics? We didn't. The whole 12 years I was in the Matildas, we did not qualify for the Olympics. North Korea kicked us out from 2004 to 2016. We didn't go in between. So it is very difficult to qualify for the Matildas, even though we're very competitive on the world stage, but we qualify through Asia. New Zealand go through Oceania, so they need, they beat Papua New Guinea 11-0 and you're off.
Hold on. How are we not in Oceania? Australia?
We were, but
no,
we made a strategic
the boys were the same.
I know.
We used to play the fifth place.
That's why it's really hard.
South American team, right?
That's right.
Okay, quick fire question time. You ready?
I'm ready.
Who was your toughest opponent on the field?
Probably Marta, Brazilian footballer, brilliant.
One game you'll never forget.
I played a game in China and they had 70,000 people in the crowd and not one was for Australia, or maybe less than 10, and that was just wild.
What's the biggest misconception about women's football?
Maybe that's they're all getting paid really well, where it's actually really only a handful at the top. I think it's still pretty tough going for 99%.
What would be your all-time dream game to commentate on?
I probably did it already, to be honest, like a World Cup final, which I did, and then also that France game against Australia. Like you couldn't have scripted that any better.
Wow. If you could give 15-year-old Amy one piece of advice, what would that be?
Change your hair. I think maybe don't hesitate. I think I second guess a lot of, do I commit fully to football? Just go for it. Go all in. That's what I'd say.
Who's your most inspiring female athlete in your lifetime?
Oh, good question. I think originally Kathy Freeman would be. I think obviously she's an icon. Now it'd be a range of different female footballers probably. I'd probably list about 20 of them, but there's lots more, which is fantastic.
What lights you up? What gives you inspiration?
Probably my 2-year-old daughter. She wakes me up at 4. She's also probably my inspiration of how can we keep paving the way. Luca, yeah.
One ritual or superstition you had before a big game?
I was always like put my left boot on first for some reason. I had to put my left boot on first, but I don't really know why.
And was there a particular moment when you felt you'd made it as a Matilda?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was really cemented in the starting 11, I think you get there, you get the start, you get the game, but when you were truly a very valuable player, I think that was maybe the moment. And I did get to play in the SCG against Canada, and I scored in front of my family, so I think that was like no matter what happens from here, that's cool.
What's the best thing about the future of women's football in Australia?
Oh, gosh, it's a brilliant time. I think the next generation that's coming through, we're probably going to have to skip a generation, but this next generation of talent that will come through will be phenomenal. But I think my favourite thing is just when you drive around and you see young girls and young boys playing all together. It's such a brilliant sport for everyone.
Well said. What do you struggle with?
Oh, I don't do downtime very well, I would say. I have to do 100 things at once. So, yeah, I struggle sitting still would be what I would say.
What's something most people don't know about you?
I'm a twin. I said that already. I can play the drums.
Wow.
Yeah.
And if a genie popped out of a bottle, what would you wish for?
Good health for everyone, my family, friends, good health. That's all you can really ask for.
What are you obsessed about?
Oh, coffee. I'm tedious about my coffee. Like if it has to be perfect. I will drive for days to get good coffee. So I'm annoying like that.
All-time favourite movie?
Anchorman, without doubt.
The most valuable advice you would give to anyone wanting to become a master?
I would say just be uniquely yourself. And I say that as in you can focus on the strength. I'm very strong on strength-based ambition. So don't get caught up on the things that you can't do. Emphasize and work on those things that you do brilliantly. And my context with that is, there's no point in me trying to learn to be good in the air because I'm still small. So be absolutely phenomenal at the skills or the speed or whatever it is you bring. And in the corporate world as well, I apply that heavily. So I'm not so great on the strategic side of things, but I'm a brilliant networker. So do that. Make sure you're doing what you're good at every single day.
What great advice and what a great way to finish. Thank you so much. It's been awesome, your insight. Tenzing, Don.
It's a great time for sports, right? As you said, it's a golden era. Two of the most visible sports are kicking goals. Like the World Cup football is one of the biggest participation and viewable sports. Track and field, how good is that? That's my passion. And it's absolutely killing it at the moment. We are breaking some really big ground. There was a 14-year-old that just broke Raiden Bowles' 100-meter record, 11.14.
That's wild.
Crazy.
Future's bright.
It is.
It is.
Very
It is in
bright.
Queensland. Galgout as well, right?
Yeah, mate, they're all coming. It's 2032. If we develop these athletes properly, football, track and field, it's going to be Australia's turn.
So we'll put a football in front of those sprinters is what we need to do.
And then follow with the
pinch
camera
them
too.
across.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Brilliant.
Nice.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed this exciting episode of the Mastering Podcast. If you got value from today's conversation, hit that subscribe button now and share this episode with a friend. Until next time.